on to the Ada County Highway District Commission meeting. We have a couple of work sessions before our formal meeting. And the first one, Steve, are you here? I didn't recognize you behind the cloth. We are happy to have a Valley Regional Transit presentation here from Mr. Stephen Hunt. And welcome.
Thank you, members of the commission. Glad to be here. So my name is Stephen Hunt, Development Director at Valley Regional Transit, and was invited to come and speak tonight on behalf of a question about what VRT could do in joint with ACHD should we receive additional funds from ACHD. So tonight's presentation, there are three different parts. One, just wanted to speak first to the shared vision and, the shared mission of ACHD and VRT, how we're working towards the same goals. Also wanted to then touch a little bit on the potential projects that we might be looking at, and then finally speak to VRT's experience in managing federal projects and the implications of using federal funds, leveraging local dollars with federal funds. So to begin with, I pulled these two from both the ACHD mission and the VRT mission, abbreviated both a little bit for focus. So ACHD's mission is to drive quality transportation for all Ada County, anytime and anywhere. And VRT's mission is to coordinate the delivery of comprehensive transportation choices to the region's citizens. But really what both of these agencies are about is about helping people get to their destinations, the opportunities that are spread throughout the county, and achieve some sense of freedom, the freedom that we talk about when we talk about the open road, being able to go from where I am to where I need to be. And essentially what we do each day is we look for ways to reduce those barriers, whatever they may be, for a person getting from where they are to where they need to be, or to lower the costs of that transportation, whether that's being on foot, on bike, in transit, or in an automobile. The places that those missions overlap most frequently between VRT and ACHD have to do with pedestrian or non-motorized infrastructure. So we have been doing this in the past, working with ACHD on identifying a number of pedestrian improvements at bus stops. Most recently, we this past year completed 39 different bus stops in Ada County and worked with ACHD, CCDC, City of Boise on improving some transit islands on Main and Fairview, which would reduce the conflict between bicycles and transit, helping speed transit up in that corridor. And again, supported ACHD on different design reviews, including Maple Grove, the downtown improvements, and orchard alignment, with an eye towards how we can ensure that the infrastructure and amenities are in place to support all users in the corridor. I think I might, did I skip a slide? Nope, sorry. I'm getting the hang of it. So for potential projects, a little bit of detail on where we would go next is we would continue to build on that relationship that we have with ACHD on investing in pedestrian or non-motorized infrastructure that connect to transit. There would be a couple of ways of approaching that. We have priority corridors or best-in-class corridors on Vista, State Street, and Fairview. On State Street and Fairview, we have active studies underway, the State Street Transit Operational Analysis, which will result in a portfolio of projects where we'll be identifying near-term actions that we can take to improve transit amenities along that corridor, including where there might be bike and transit conflicts or improving pedestrian connections to those stops. Fairview is another corridor between essentially from the river up to Milwaukee and then actually beyond all the way out to the Village or Kleiner Park in Meridian. We have a study that we just kicked off to identify opportunities to improve transit and pedestrian amenities along that corridor, and ACHD is party to both of these studies, and we're looking for ways that we can support one another in making those corridors as well as we can. The other The other opportunity would be just in general bus stop improvements. In 2018, VRT estimated there was about $5.2 million in investments that we would need to make to improve all of the Ada County bus stops to meet ADA requirements, as well as improve the passenger amenities at those locations. So a couple of different ways that we could step into increased investments from Ada County. So this is the Fairview corridor. There are 40-ish stops on State Street and on Fairview. This corridor is the one that's being studied now. And then, as I mentioned, we have identified a number of other bus stops throughout the Ada County area that could receive improvement. And each of these projects are at varying degrees of readiness, but we have studies underway that would make us able to turn those into real projects very quickly. Next, just to speak to federal experience at VRT and the implications of using federal funds on projects. Just wanted to highlight back in coming out of the recession with the American Recovery Act, VRT received about $3.5 million that was put into bus stop improvements and implemented between 2009 and 2012. We managed the federal regulations associated with those federal funds and any NEPA review associated with that. This is just a specific example. In any project that we're doing with federal funds, we do this process, but this was a focused example of trying to invest a relatively large amount of money of federal oversight on pedestrian improvements and transit improvements, such as what we would recommend for any continued partnership with ACHD, or increased partnership with ACHD, I should say. As far as the NEPA review is concerned, typically the types of improvements that we're looking at would be either a categorical or documented categorical exclusion, which means they're relatively straightforward in terms of the NEPA review. They tend, unless we get outside of existing right-of-way, that's when things start to get a little bit more complicated, but even then, they tend to be pretty straightforward environmental reviews. Since then, from 2012 to the present, we've continued to make pedestrian and bus stop improvements throughout Ada and Canyon County, always following the federal regulations and guidelines for that. Those projects have been integrated into our annual capital program, and they've been driven by both local priorities and existing needs in the system. In FY21, this current year, we're looking at making improvements to 8 different stops with the current budget of about $240,000. And the other active project that is most relevant to this type of work that we would be looking at with this, with potential more money from ACHD, would be the Main and Fairview transit islands, which are larger types of investments, but they're examples of the types of things that you could do to improve pedestrian and transit amenities within the existing. So just to wrap up, wanted to go back to the shared mission that both ACHD and VRT have on building the infrastructure that provides people the freedom to participate in the events and activities that they need to throughout the day. That VRT does have capital projects that are ready for funding in the near term that would support ACHD's missions of building, again, ADA compliant and pedestrian amenities along corridors of interest. We've got extensive experience with federal projects, and those projects, because they're bounded by their scope, we're talking about a bus stop at a particular location, that's the area that we would be looking for compliance with those federal dollars. It's the same type of thing that we do and have done each year for bus stop improvements. And together, I think VRT and ACHD would make ideal capital partners for a project like this. And so with that, I would stand for any questions.
I have one, Stephen. My understanding is that the ask is $500,000 and the leverage is approximately $2.5 million included. How certain is that? Has it been applied for? Is it going to be applied for quickly? And I mean, you gave some general ideas of what types of projects they would be. It might help to know of the certainty of the grant process. At least for me, it would help.
For sure. Thank you, President Goldthorpe. So as with any local contribution that we receive, we look to leverage that as much as we can so that we can extend our local dollars as far as possible. We were asked to come and share what we would do with an amount of about $500,000. We would look to leverage that. Typically, capital projects through the FTA would be leveraged at an 80-20 match, so that would get to the $2.5 million. If you use different funding sources, it could be, if you were using, for example, STPG dollars, that match rate is different. But each year when we do our annual budgeting process, we look at matching federal funds to those local dollars. What we do know about upcoming appropriations is that all of the versions of the appropriations bill that are currently being considered have a substantial increase to transit capital 5339 funds. So we're expecting there to be additional federal funds available.
And that's an 80-20 match?
As a capital project, we would be applying we would be looking for as much as 80-20, yes.
So that's not certain?
It is not certain, no. I mean, we don't have like a for sure amount of federal funds that are ready to be matched to every local dollar. Those are things that we would be doing each year with our
Okay, so could I ask you why you need the money in advance?
So we were asked to come and share what we would do with an increase in funding. And so the need is there. We have existing projects that we could implement.
They are already been leveraged and approved?
They have not, no. The need in the sense that we know that we have existing bus stops that are deficient. We also know that we will have some studies that are wrapping up the end of this fiscal year, the first quarter of next fiscal year, that will identify additional specific projects on both State and Fairview. So this would put us in a position to roll those studies directly into capital projects.
When I was first explained of the potential for this in your visit, it was strictly from the standpoint of leverage. And that's always interesting to me because, you know, you give somebody $1 and you get $2.50 back worth of value, that's fine. If we were to give you $1 and you were to use it on a project that you needed that $1 for, and that was as far as it went, that maybe that wouldn't be so attractive. And that's why I've been trying to pigeonhole you on the leverage part of it.
And again, I would just reiterate, with all of our local partners, whenever we receive local dollars, we look for opportunities to extend or leverage that. We don't, and since this was somewhat of a hypothetical coming into it in terms of what would we do with additional funds, we don't have the federal funds committed in any way towards that $500,000. We anticipate that there will be additional federal funds available, both this and in future years, several times more than what we've had in the past for capital projects, and so it would put us in a position to take advantage of that. To be responsive to the request, what would we do with additional money from ACHD? This is how we would propose to go about doing that, whether that's at purely the local rate or at a leveraged rate with federal funds.
Well, I know that I personally would prefer it to be leveraged to the hilt, but I don't know about the rest of the commission. That was my only line of questions.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think, and to Stephen's point, I think the item about 500,000 was brought up by Commissioner Hansen with the request that if that should happen, that BRT would come back to us with suggestions on how they would use those funds. So, correct, Stephen?
That's correct, yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just have a couple questions. Stephen, would you be amenable to come back with those study results? I'd love to see just kind of the results from the several studies that you mentioned earlier in the presentation.
State Street Transit Alternative Analysis and the
Yes.
Fairview study?
That would be great.
Absolutely.
And then I guess I know I'm a newbie, but a few other folks are on the call too. What would be some elements, and just speak really plainly, like what are some elements of the capital improvement project process that we normally would be taking over for that would enhance the ADA accessibility of some of these bus stops? So are we really talking about just truncated domes and slopes and redoing some concrete, sidewalks, or could it be all these other aspects that we probably normally would have done on a certain street or intersection where a bus stop may exist?
Thank you, Commissioner, Mr. President. The couple of examples that I would bring up would be we have a project that we put on hold actually for the State Street Transit operational analysis to complete, which would extend the sidewalk behind an access or a curb cut for getting into that business. So the sidewalk currently dips down and goes through that access. There isn't an ADA path that connects that corner farther to the west along the sidewalk. So what this project would do is, in addition to building the landing pad for the bus, it would also build that path that goes back behind the apron for access to that business. And that's one example that we currently have designed where we would be looking at making those improvements that are immediately adjacent to the bus stop. Those would be the types of projects that ACHD would be looking at doing along a corridor as it looks for opportunities to improve pedestrian amenities. So other examples could be curb cuts at specific intersections, maybe where there is no curb cut, and as you mentioned, the appropriate ramps, truncated domes, etc. That's kind of at the bare minimum. Beyond that, we could be looking at additional paths or connections that maybe don't exist today but could or should exist, and like as I say, at a minimum, we'd be looking at the bus stop and what's immediately adjacent to it. With the ARA funds, we actually put in some bus stops that didn't have attached sidewalks. So if we were to work with ACHD on identifying a larger project that would be, here's the stop and whatever it is, if it's a quarter mile of additional pavement that needs to be put in there to attach the pathway, those would be the types of things that we could consider.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Stephen, just a couple of quick questions. On the federal funding issue, are those matching funds dependent upon where your funds come from that are being matched? In other words, if ACHD didn't provide these funds to you, you could appropriate other funds that are at your disposal, and you could use those to get federal matching dollars. Is that correct?
Mr. President, we, as mentioned before, we look to leverage any local dollar that's eligible for federal funds. And so to an extent, yes, it doesn't matter as much where the money, like which local partner contributes the funds as to whether or not it is eligible for federal funds. There may be federal funds that a local jurisdiction has that we can't match, if that makes sense. You can't match federal to federal. But if we're talking about truly local dollars, then yes, any local dollar could be used to match those federal funds. The opportunity that we have here with this concept, however, is to bring additional local dollars that could bring in more federal funds to advance both VRT and ACHD interests. So we work with our partners to identify what their funding priorities are, and then both build projects and match federal dollars according to those priorities.
Okay. Are your standard funding sources, are they not considered local dollars?
Mr. President, we receive voluntary local contributions from a number of stakeholders in Ada and Canyon County. Essentially all of the local jurisdictions we request funds from, as well as Ada and Canyon County, Boise State, CWI, CCDC, Meridian Development Corporation, etc.
So for purposes of federal matching, any of those funds would be eligible, for example, if you're seeking federal matching dollars for those. Okay. Okay, let me get to a couple other things just to make sure. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that over the past 3 or 4 years, even before the COVID-19 thing hit, that VRT's ridership numbers have been going down. Is that correct?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, when we look at transit ridership, depending on how we define that, yes, if we're talking about the fixed route Ada County ridership, going all the way up until COVID, those numbers were trending down. The first quarter of 2020, we were better, like we were trending up going into COVID.
Okay. So in general, for a few years, it's been going down, and At the same time, of course, I think it's also true that costs have been going up. That's not a big surprise because costs of most things go up. But let me just say this. I think when it comes to the prospect of taking the funds that we've got, we don't have enough funds for what's on our plate already. ACHD doesn't. And as much as I wish VRT well, VRT is not our primary responsibility. And so I have to admit, even though these are all great projects, but I have to admit I'm skeptical about taking $500,000 of ACHD's funds and saying, giving it off to do other things that are kind of outside of our primary mission. That's kind of my concern. And it's got nothing against what you're doing. It's just that you do your thing, we'll do ours. That's kind of, I'm inclined to do it that way. So that's kind of my 2 cents on the matter.
Another time it might be helpful so that, and we could do it internally for that matter, so that possibly the entire commission could have either a briefing or a rebriefing on our limits of financially of what we can do for transit. And I know that just recently with last year's legislation, the opportunity to have more funds available for transit is there. They haven't materialized yet, correct, Steve?
They have not. No.
Okay.
Well, if I
It's
can,
different, Steve.
Careful.
the way that the only funds that ACHD has that aren't limited to the construction, reconstruction, and maintenance highways
Right.
is sales tax.
Right.
And we get about $1.7 million of that annually.
I understand that that's about to change.
No.
No. Okay.
The money that comes from the TECM, which is the new, it does have a sales tax component, but the legislature in the new law, it has to be distributed according to the highway distribution account, which
Okay,
is
that's right.
709, and that is for the construction, reconstruction of roads. So
Okay.
we only got 1.7 million, which is typically what we've had in the past.
And we're typically spending that on commuter ride, correct?
Yeah, or other things. Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. President, I just want to clarify. Thank you, Stephen. We don't use anywhere near the 1.7 million on commuter ride, but commuter ride is a very important system because it matches federal. We get federal money for all those vehicles, and of course it's an enterprise fund. So the fees that are paid to help do that, but we do have to have some local contribution. The unique thing at Valley Regional Transit when it was created was that it wasn't given its own funding source. And in Caldwell and Nampa, they have made contributions. They do get money for transportation that Boise, Eagle, Meridian, Cuna don't get. ACHD gets that money because of the way we're a single purpose, a countywide highway district. So they actually have more flexibility to get that money in Caldwell and Nampa, and they make some contributions. But it's also critical because part of our mission is to improve transportation. Transportation is about using our right-of-way efficiently. And it's so critical that as our city becomes denser and denser, the opportunity to use that right-of-way for all modes as efficiently as possible is so critical. And to me, we're 20 years late in being a partner with Boise and Meridian and Eagle and Nampa and Caldwell and Boise State and College of Western Idaho in making some local contribution. But of course, VRT can't budget for those until their partner agencies budget for it. I'm sure you sort of estimate based on last year's contribution, but since last year's contribution from ACHD was zero, I mean, we're not talking dues, we're talking about the contribution. It's very prudent not to budget for it until we do that. And I know that's the same thing with Boise and Meridian and I know Nampa and Caldwell. It's always a challenge, because they're facing a lot of other demands for those resources. So I just really appreciate it. This is an opportunity to strengthen our partnership because we do this already. We have a partnership with VRT. We have an agreement, a written agreement. And I've spoken with Steve about this would be subject to a written agreement with VRT. We have that written agreement with VRT on operating commuter ride. We operate commuter ride with the agreement of Valley Regional Transit. And so we're allowed to do that. And so it would be the same thing. And so the opportunity not just to build the sidewalks that may help lead somebody to a bus stop, but also to assist in building that bus stop and making it accessible, which we don't do. We don't build, ACHD doesn't build bus stops and doesn't, make those improvements. And they, just like we have a long list, as I've seen, a long list. And when a bus stop is inaccessible and people don't use it, then the transit isn't used and the right-of-way isn't efficiently used. So I really appreciate this. Is a small amount, and it's a good way of getting started. And what I like the commission to do is just say, let's move forward, put a proposed item of $500,000 in the proposed budget. We can always change it, remove it, increase, decrease it as we approach our final date in August. But that way, we can continue this conversation and with VRT to enhance the assets along the right-of-way that we manage.
Mr. President?
Yes.
And I would just like to echo Commissioner Hansen's comments, and just so much of the things that we control impact ridership in terms of the accessibility of those bus stops, having the ability to walk or bike safely to their work or where they play. And so, and I'm always about leveraging the money that we do have to bring in new money for our entire transportation system. So I think this is an unprecedented time where we have so much important funding going towards infrastructure. So I'm all about sharing the wealth and making sure that our entire system is well invested in, and this seems like a great opportunity to do that.
And I would remind, and I think Jim brought this up, I would remind the entire commission that that this would be a budget item, and this would be subject to the process that we have for our budget. And you have already seen different items proposed and actually approved to go into this year's budget. This has not been, but I think it might be an easier sale in our budget if, in fact, this were to be able to be focused on, for instance, the State Street corridor, which we have a commitment to try and make it work, absolutely work, because of how important that is to VRT's future. And so I would suggest that maybe a little more homework be done on how that might be accomplished, and it might make this an easier decision.
Mr. President?
Yes.
And I just wanted to clarify to Stephen, too, that we haven't even started our budget process yet. We haven't even decided. There's several options that we can go with, and we haven't really decided as a commission yet which direction we're going. So a lot of those decisions still have to be made. So, but really appreciate you coming here this evening and providing some suggestions. And I agree with Commissioner Goldthorpe that probably a little bit more homework to come back. And,
If I could add one more piece of homework, and I appreciate that you've said every single one of the federal bills that are moving the way through has a sizable increase in transit funding, and that, I'm not too surprised at that. It would be good to sort of quantify some of those options, because the thing that has pained me the most sitting on VRT's board is knowing how much federal investment there's been through FTA and knowing that it passes over Idaho because we have nothing to pull it. We have so little to pull it down. CWI can't give us enough money, or Boise or Nampa. And so the jurisdictions that have more money are able to, and we're paying that federal dollar. I mean, it's going elsewhere. Idahoans are contributing to that federal appropriations, but because we don't have a very sizable match to meet the long list of needs. So if you were able to say, I know that it's a moving target. The federal budget is as confusing as anybody's budget. If you could at least come up with some, this is what we anticipate the increase to be, and that, even a tiny little bit pulled down to Idaho. And I know Congressman Simpson has also agreed to help and we've actually written a letter of support with an earmark specifically for a piece of the State Street operations.
In closing, I'm gonna put this in the vernacular of Sales 101. You have received buying signals tonight. It's up to you to capitalize on them. And thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the
Thank you,
commission.
Stephen. Always
Great,
nice to
great
see you.
job, Stephen.
All right, number 2 is Tom Laws is going to discuss with us what we know about the Highway 16 project and expectations and possibilities and on and on and on.
All right, let me just pull this up. Thank you, President Goldthorpe, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Tom Laws, Planning Supervisor here with the Ada County Highway District. And just as you said, I'll be presenting an informational briefing on Highway 16. So why are we discussing this now? I'm sure all of you've seen in the news, but the ITD board recently allocated $170 million for phase 2 construction of the Highway 16 extension. Those funding dollars came from the Transportation Expansion and Mitigation Fund, Congestion Mitigation Fund, or TECM. And with that funding, it was discussed to begin construction starting this fall in fiscal year 2022, and for the phase 2 process to be complete within 2 to 3 years. And I'll go into detail of what exactly phase 2 means in the next slides. In addition to that, there's already been roughly $90 million that has been allocated and spent for the purchase of right-of-way along this corridor. And in addition to that, ITD board also set aside $14 million to begin the design of phase 3 through Garvey savings as well. So how ITD breaks out Highway 16 is within 3 phases. And so the first phase is what we're all familiar with. That is the 2 miles connection that goes from State Street down to Chinden, or Highway 2026. That was completed in 2014. And now what we're looking at starting this fall and being completed in the next 2 to 3 years is the phase 2, which is the 5 miles that connect from Chinden all the way down to the interstate. This section includes new signalized intersections at Franklin Road and Eustick Road, with overpasses at McMillan and Cherry Lane. There's also the phase 3, as I mentioned, with that those Garvey dollars for design, which would include at a later date to come back and make full interchanges and additional improvements to both the interstate, but then also at Eustick, Chinden, Franklin, and State Street, removing those signalized intersections and adding full interchanges. So with phase 2, just walking south to north, this is what it would look like. We'd have at the interstate interchange with on and off ramps. At Franklin Road, a signalized intersection. Cherry Lane would have an overpass. Eustick would have a signalized intersection and a rerouted McDermott Road. McMillan would have an overpass, and then additions to the signalized intersection at Highway 2026 or Chinden, with no change at State Street or Highway 44. And then below here is just a cross-section of what that looked like. So there'd be 4 travel lanes in total, 2 lanes in either direction with 10-foot shoulders, 14-foot medians, and the potential to expand that in the future. I wanted to pull up a few maps to show how this impacts everything that we have here at the Ada County Highway District. And so what you see here on to the top of the map is Chinden Highway 2026. To the bottom is the interstate. The red line is the Highway 16 alignment. In orange, we have Canyon County. Everything in that lighter white color is Ada County, our jurisdiction. And then specifically within our capital improvements plan are all the burgundy and blue lines, and then the black intersections that we've identified for need for future improvement. In addition to this, I wanted to highlight the new Owyhee High School that's just off of McDermott and Eustick as well. Looking at programming implications, since this is going to be built over the next 2 to 3 years, Currently, we only have 2 projects identified in our adopted integrated 5-year work plan. Those are both interim signals intersection projects at McMillan and Black Cat and Ustick and Black Cat, identified here in orange. So essentially, what we have a need to move forward with are all these projects identified in blue and orange on this map to your right. And those ones we've identified really with the blue ones, the blue projects being those next to those signalized intersections, which would have the biggest impact and the most pressing need. And those sections in orange with the segments and intersections being those secondary that largely fall off of the McMillan overpass. And I guess I would add with that, in addition, I've provided you with a handout that highlights what we're proposing with the draft integrated 5-year work plan on the projects that we deem that should be incorporated moving forward with this next plan iteration. And with that final dollar amount, that is not entirely what we're showing within the plan. Several of those projects are just going to be proposed for the design and right-of-way in the next 5 years, with that construction actually occurring in future. And so with that, just to conclude with ITD's accelerated place in actions, this has a big impact on portions of the ACHD network, and ACHD is continuing to monitor the Highway 16 timeline and plan accordingly within our integrated 5-year work plan. With that, I will conclude my presentation and stand for any questions.
Yeah, I've got a few. I probably won't ask them all right now, but you couched all of these of this report with the word needs. Whose needs? ITD's needs, Emmett's needs, Nampa's needs, or our needs?
President Goldthorpe, members of the commission, I would say that these are our needs, our citizens' needs. All of
Why?
these projects.
Why? This is going west. We usually go east.
All of the projects that we're proposing moving up are currently identified in our CIP. And so
I understand that.
There was never a question of when or if these projects should be built. It was more of a when. And with the improvements to Highway 16, this just accelerates those.
That's true as well. But this project, Highway 16, was pretty much just dropped in our laps after being told to us for years that it might be 20 years out. And which we just shrugged our shoulders on because, of course, it says nothing. And with us being, unless things have drastically changed in the last few months, we have so many projects in our 5-year work plan and CIP that, close to $1 billion worth already that citizens are clamoring to see happen, that cities like Cuna, like Meridian, like Eagle, and others absolutely consider critical to their continued comfortable existence or business or urban renewal district success, any number of things. And I'm just wondering if anybody besides some of us consider those really important. And I know you all do, but I don't think that the state does. Just something I had in mind.
Mr. President, I have a
Yes.
question about, thanks, Tom. Could you explain why the alignment, like why the big shift into Canyon County in terms of the highway there?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, I might pass that on to our Deputy Director.
You're doing good, Tom.
Tom's doing a great job.
He is doing a great job.
I didn't mean to jump up and interrupt him, but for the record, my name is Justin Lucas. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management at the Ada County Highway District. Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, so the study that was completed years ago that determined the Highway 16 alignment looked at multiple different options. One of those options was driving it right down the McDermott Road corridor, which we actually own. They looked at various other options. And the one they landed on was primarily driven by the connection of Highway 16 to Interstate 84. that's a critical connection point, and the decision about how and where to connect to the interstate really drove a lot of the decision making associated with Highway 16, which is why at some point they had to break away from the McDermott corridor and get over and be able to connect to the highway, to the interstate at a different, better location ultimately than McDermott is today. Also, they were looking for a clean slate, and we happen to, control the majority of the McDermott corridor in partnership with our neighboring county. There wasn't anything about whether it's in Ada County or Canyon County. The state, I don't think, that took that into consideration. They were looking for the right alignment and the right engineering so they could connect as efficiently to the interstate as possible.
Thank you.
Mr. President, just a couple comments and then a couple questions.
Or, Mr. President.
Your excuse.
The other issue was the Nepa analysis that went through.
And what is NEPA again?
National Environmental Policy Act.
Yeah,
Okay.
environment.
Okay, EPA but with an N.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
and that's the categorical exclusion, and they look at the impacts on the environment, homes, cultural resources, all those, and that was most certainly an impact on the alignment as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Quick question for either Tom, well, probably Tom. I'm looking down here at the Ustick Road, McDermott Road, Black Cat Road corridor. And from McDermott west, that's, right on the county line, correct?
Mr. President, that's correct.
What's Nampa's or Canyon County's share of that project? $5.5 million looks to me, because it's not even the intersection, it looks to me like that's the whole cost.
Mr. President, I believe that's correct, that that does not include the Canyon County share, so it's likely less than that number that is shown there.
So probably ours would drop by half. These are things we really need to know.
Yeah.
I can look into that and get back to you for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. President, I was just going to make a comment that I'm not sure the term that this was just dropped in our lap is totally accurate. This project has been bandied around for a couple of decades. And I know when I first got on the commission, we had a conversation after Director Wong had been to ITD talking about the intersection improvements, et cetera. So we've had that knowledge, and I would certainly hope that with that, we have been looking ahead and being a little bit of proactive endeavor with our planning there. Completing this highway, this is a critical north-south connection. We've got 3 counties, 6 cities. It's a major growth corridor close to a major interstate system. 10 years ago, it was about 10 years ago, John Church did an economic impact study, and that was right when the downturn was hitting. And he projected over a 30-year period that this project, this corridor, would generate $1.9 billion in new revenue for the state. And then as all those businesses and individuals come in and develop, property taxes, who gets property taxes? So now with the explosive growth that we've had, and this being 10 years ago, I'm sure those numbers have gone up quite a bit. So that's not a bad ROI on our investment here.
Well, you're assuming that kind of growth would pay for itself when in fact growth hasn't previously.
I think we don't have a high-speed corridor like this is going to be an expressway, and in many ways it's going to correct the ills and the
ills
cluster
for a
that
lot of people
developed
besides us.
with Eagle Road.
Yep, I understand that too.
So I kind of lost my train of thought where I was going here. And high-speed access like this, easy on, easy off, that's going to attract development. I remember having a meeting with Sorrento Lactalis and talking with their COO. You can have the best product in the world, but if you don't have the infrastructure to move your goods in and out. So I think that's going to be a major attraction for development around that area too. So Tom, I do have a question. Are all these improvements specifically because Highway 16 is going in? What would we be doing absent Highway 16 with the school and all the growth because this is just like right in the center of where all the growth is happening to the west. So that was a question that we got last week too, and we were going to follow up on that. So I'm just curious, is all this predicated on Highway 16? So if Highway 16 were to go away, ACHD wouldn't be doing any of this? That's my question.
Mr. President, Commissioner May, I would say no, that I know a lot of these, like I mentioned, had already been identified in the CIP, so it's really just a matter of when. I think specifically talking about USTIC, that the Owyhee High School probably accelerated those projects with or without Highway 16, and so a few of these you probably would have seen within our draft integrated 5-year work plan one way or the other.
Okay, so this has been on our radar, and we've been anticipating this. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. President?
Yes.
So, yeah, this is, we've known about 16 for a long time. To me, the only question is if growth is going to pay for itself. And really, this is a development that the state is paying for, but not the impacts of that development. It seems to me we would be fine if the state, in its appropriation of $170 million, had added $34.6 million so that the adjacent facilities could also be built out consistent with that, because what they're doing is it's a mandate from the state saying we want this, but we want you to accelerate and take your existing funds and accelerate the build out of something that is we've already got on our long-term plans as being much further out. I recognize that the preference on that side of the county and in Canyon County is for a whole lot of low-density development in farmland, and that's the patterns that we've seen. So we're going to build it at enormous cost. There'll be tremendous congestion, even if ACHD does shift $34 million into building out these facilities. But it's also important to know that just shifts the income. It means that investment isn't being made in older parts of the county where we already have facilities, where we have brownfields, where we have underutilized facilities. But that is a common pattern. It's been happening constantly as the big development further west, and eventually will reach the Oregon state line. The big disappointment is that there's not a lot of multimodal facilities associated with this. And the same entity, the state, is asking us to incur a local mandate, a forced mandate of basically coming up with $34 million. And they continue to deny us the tools that our taxpayers are asking us to have. As Steve described, one of the limitations in one of our statutes and the way in which funding gets funneled through, we're denied those very tools. We go and ask for an incredibly modest adjustment to the impact fee statute. Legislature denies it. So it just doesn't make sense. Seems to me we are in a position to say, okay, go ahead, build 16, but don't build any interchanges between the interstate and 44 until you give us the money and give us the tools. And then we'll work with you in order to do that, because that's a partnership. But if you deny us the basic tools to use the right-of-way effectively, to allow more and more people to move in that right-of-way and move into and out of these neighborhoods that they're going to be affecting, if you deny us those tools and you deny us the resources and say, no, you've got to shift it from other parts of the county, then that's very difficult to do. It seems to me they could move forward with a phasing, and the phasing would be an expressway, as Commissioner May pointed out, but it'd be a direct expressway all the way from 84 to 44, and then, or to 2026, actually, the other segment's already built. And then we'll wait to build the interchanges until we get the resources and the tools. So it wouldn't be that additional cost. We'll move forward with the other pieces that are already in our plan, but I agree with Commissioner Goldthorpe. I'd want to accelerate the shift of resources without the legislature giving us the necessary tools to really represent our taxpayers and use the tax dollars we have to the most efficient way and the highest return on that investment.
Okay, yes, Mary?
The interchanges are in phase 3, correct?
I'll
My
go ahead and
understanding.
pull up the
Yeah.
map again, President Goldthorpe and Commissioner May.
Phase 2 is
So,
the actual,
Phase 2, there would be two overpasses at McMillan and Cherry with signalized intersections at Ustick and Franklin. And so those complete interchanges won't be built until Phase 3, but we'd still have impacts on the network at Ustick and Franklin with this Phase 2 alignment.
okay.
They'd have to build it
And
in a
this-
way that
this
doesn't allow
will
access.
Also, living in the west end of the
Yeah.
valley, Highway 44 and Shinden, and they're just parking lots. And we've never been very advanced or with our north-south road infrastructure. So that's always been lacking. And I think people thought Eagle Road was going to be a panacea, and that didn't pan out. And it's a literal parking lot. I remember a few years ago when a water main broke and Eagle Road was closed. Well, I mean, you might as well just stay home for a week because you could just not go to the east at all. It was just a standstill. So there is a great need to move traffic north and south out there, and then having this too has a potential of taking a load off our local system, because not everybody wants to come into Boise. You know, they want to get to the interstate, they want to go to Micron, they want to go to the airport. So there's just really a lot of benefits to it as well. So, and I think the total investment with ITD is about $552 million. So this is a huge project.
Tom?
You add up all the
Yeah.
the costs there. Yeah.
One other little stretch on Franklin Road between McDermott and Black Cat, the corridor project. You know, I'm remembering when we did the corridor project between 10 Mile and Black Cat. And then we had intersection projects. And these were all, I believe, federal projects. And we had matches, which were ridiculously low, so we jumped all over them. Why is it that there is none of that in this proposal?
I believe that's a question for Deputy Director Lucas.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe. Excellent question. So about 5 years ago, ACHD shifted its federal funding strategy to move away from funding large capital projects and put that money towards our maintenance program. Using those dollars on maintenance has allowed us to really leverage and increase our maintenance activities on the roadway network.
So those other corridor projects and intersection projects were applied for federally before we made that change?
Yes, President Goldthorpe, that's correct. We did a section of Franklin. We did a section of 5 Mile where we had to build a sound wall, and I don't know if you remember that or recollect that issue. But there were some reasons why the commission chose to move away from using those federal dollars on some of those larger capital projects because they come with quite a few strings attached.
Yeah.
Our general counsel mentioned the NEPA process and the requirements that come through that process. But we certainly, we are right now planning and hoping to receive federal funding for the 5 Mile overpass and the connection in that area. So we've shifted strategically towards these kind of ITD supportive projects. That overpass is the one we focused on most recently.
Okay, yeah, I remember some of the strings because I got a little more involved than I thought I was going to in the right-of-way purchase for the Whitings. Steve's still laughing at that. But, yeah, okay, well, that answers my question.
Mr. President,
Yes.
and maybe Justin, I have some questions that I don't know if they're for you or for Tom, but with respect to this Phase 3 configuration, it looks to me like this entire corridor is being planned with diamond interchanges. Is that correct?
Correct.
And can you talk about the reason that ITD has gone for that instead of like single point interchanges or diverging diamond interchanges, or there's a host of other design alternatives that I think, it's my understanding, are more efficient but wouldn't necessarily cost a lot more to build, especially when you're starting with a blank slate in a case like this. Can you speak to that, or is that something I'd have to go talk to ITD about that?
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, I can't speak to the details of their interchange design selection. Once again, there was extensive analysis done on the Highway 16 project. There was an environmental study, as mentioned by Steve, and they came up with this phased approach and have released that out to the public. ACHD has participated in the process, but this is partially in our county, partially in another county, and our influence, at least at the staff level, on their ultimate design decisions isn't extensive. I mean, they're
Right.
taking a lot of public input and making these decisions based on their engineering expertise and judgment.
Okay. Well, let me just, by way of comment, I'm happy to see this project moving forward, and I think, part of what President Goldthorpe said, I think, is accurate. That here this project sat for a long, long time, and we're expecting it, and then all of a sudden, boom, it gets accelerated, and so that puts us in a little bit of a bind with regard to the presumed funding that we'll need to come up with to work with it. So yeah, that's a challenge. We're going to have to figure out how to budget for this, and even though I think the project is worth doing, and it's a needed project, this does put us under additional stress. So,
Mr. President,
Yes.
I just want to say I appreciate all of the diverging comments and thoughts, and I agree that there aren't a lot of accessible routes from the north to the south, but it pains me, similarly to what Commissioner Hansen was describing, like we just don't have the tools to, or that collaborative spirit with some of the folks that accelerated this project. And I would just like to see more of that collaboration happen with the State House and whoever, so that we can afford to maintain this expensive, beautiful roadway if we are to build it. So, and meanwhile, folks in my district still don't have sidewalks along Chinden, and what's the plan for that? So here's this bright, shiny new object that people have been wanting for a long time, and yet we don't want to fund things that have been at the bottom of the barrel for quite some time. But thank you.
And while we're on the record and being vocal about it, and along the lines of what Commissioner Hansen was saying, here in 7 or 8 years, we stand to lose our entire Safe Routes to School program because the legislature won't act on something in the area of fairness as far as who pays what for registration fees. And, that's a lot of money. And so, I'm glad we're having this conversation now because there needs to be a bunch more conversations and some agreements that people will, at the very least, make an effort on our behalf. And so, Director.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you. A tremendous discussion across the board. I would like to remind you that you are a couple minutes out from the 6 o'clock. I'd like to make a recommendation if I could, and that is in the Director's report, I will have a thought along Commissioner Pickering's idea of how you might be able to achieve that. But I'd like you, if you're amenable, to go into the pre-commission now, review the agenda, and then I'll do the Director's report after we're done with the session today, if that's okay with you.
That sounds pretty reasonable because this is going to be discussed a lot.
Yes, sir, it is.
Director Wong, I just had a quick question. When you briefed us before, you had said 20 million.
I said 20 plus, it was an estimate.
So he had just not completed
Right.
the.
Yes, ma'am.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Then,
Tom.
With that, thank you very much, Tom. Glad you wore your Kevlar today. And we'll go ahead and I
Good
know
job.
Commissioner McKinney has a question about the consent agenda, but are there any questions about the agenda before we go into the meeting?
Yeah, Mr. President, I would like to discuss item 3 on the consent agenda, so I would propose that we remove it from the consent agenda and put it on the regular agenda.
Okay, then we'll do that. We'll make it number what?
Number last.
Number 3
Number
on the
five.
regular agenda. So we'll just go from 3 to 3.
And Mr. President, did we have a request to move the vacation to a
No,
later date?
That's already addressed.
Okay, so
Yep.
people listening in know that we're going to move the
I
vacation.
don't know if they know it, but that's what we're gonna do.
Okay. Okay.
Well, in that
It's
case,
been a request.
you didn't think we'd get it done in half a minute, did you?
I had full confidence in you, Mr. President, and the Commission, as I always do. And we could be very daring
Yeah.
and start 15 seconds early.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
Six o'clock.
Welcome all of you to the Ada County Highway District Regular Commission meeting, and we'll begin as usual with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, we'll go to the consent agenda, and items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and are enacted with one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are considered commission action items unless noted, and it has already been requested that consent agenda item 3 be moved over to the regular agenda as item number 3. So a motion to approve the consent agenda would automatically include that. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Then we'll go ahead with item number 1 on the regular agenda, which is a public hearing. It has to do with resolution number 2358, our Livable Streets Performance Measures adoption hearing, and there will be a request for adoption. And Ryan.
Hello, Commission. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm Ryan Head. I'm the planning manager here at ACHD. I'm here today to present Resolution 2358 to adopt the Livable Streets Performance Measures. This is an adoption hearing. At the end of this presentation, we will be asking you to adopt that resolution and recommending that that it be adopted and as an addendum to the Transportation Land Use Integration Plan. As we've discussed in previous work sessions, this draft criteria really represents industry best practice. We've worked with nationally recognized consultants and locally recognized advisory committees who really have provided good feedback throughout this entire process. We've also taken this out to the public, and I'll share with you briefly here in a moment the feedback we received and the modifications we made, but really do believe that what we are presenting to you today represents a collaborative process to reflect on the comfort and safety of bicyclists and pedestrians. The guide gives us really the opportunity to have a measurement for all users, those who drive, those who ride bikes, those who walk. It reflects on and provides a goal for where we try to build our facilities to ensure that they are serving all users. One thing that's always a challenge is when you bring in new ideas and thoughts is, what about the past? And so as we retrofit or as we make modifications to existing environment, really the goal is progress towards those goals. We're trying to do what we can to achieve a comfortable and positive experience for all users. We've talked, and the guide includes implementation actions. It includes things that we're already doing. The Commission has already made many steps in this direction and positive steps that are already bringing this into practice. But the end goal is that this become part of our daily practice. And so the new efforts really reflect that, including review of our policy manual and the impacts and making modifications to bring it into all we do. As mentioned, we had a 4-week public comment period from May 17th through June 14th. The modifications to the draft guide as a result of that are shown here, we really did receive very good feedback, very constructive and positive feedback from the public that gave us some good ideas and tools to make this really a better product. Recognizing that we did have advisory committees who guided this, we did though want to take into account. So just to highlight a couple of the modifications we made. There was a lot of question on how we measure bike lanes. We don't, and our inventory that we're doing now does not include the gutter pan. That's just not how we would look at it. So we cemented that and put in clarifying language that says that's how we do it. Another thing that was really positive is that really not all buffers between the sidewalk and the vehicle lanes are created equal. And so we've added an adjustment factor related to street trees and the impact that those can have on increasing the comfort level for those who are walking. There's a variety of other ones here. Those I'll just leave it at that. But with that, after taking any public testimony, we are recommending that you adopt Resolution 2358, incorporating the Livable Streets Performance Measure into the Transportation Land Use Integration Plan. With that, I'll stand for any comments or questions.
I have one comment other than to thank you profusely for all the work that you've done this past year on this. And I'm glad it's happening. It's probably overdue, and it's making a lot of folks much more comfortable with the thought of riding and walking in our right-of-way going forward. And for that, I'm grateful. Any other questions or comments?
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. President, I just have a couple of questions for Ryan. Talk to me about the practical effect of adoption of these Livable Streets performance measures. What happens? What's done differently when we adopt these?
Absolutely. President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, the benefit of the commission adoption is that we then have full commission support to implement, right? To use these to make decisions and to guide our design decisions to look at. Really, one of the things that the tool provides is that you can see if we build it this way, this is the experience that you would expect to have. If we build it this way, we could improve or add and make it better for all users. And so it really provides that as a guiding document. Ultimately, it's not policy, but it is guidance. And that guidance is key, to have commission endorsed guidance to help direct the decisions we make as staff.
So if effectively then, it sounds like what you're saying is this is going to be then a guide for evaluating alternatives on any improvement project going forward.
Correct.
Is that accurate? So we'll be looking at it and saying, okay, if we build it this way with this configuration of sidewalks, et cetera, we can expect this level of, what is the LTS? Level of
Stress.
transportation stress, is that what it is? Okay.
Perfect.
And if we build it this way, it'll be a different level of stress. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Then I guess, and I guess I'm happy to have these kinds of, measuring tools. I think that's good. I would like, just as a comment, I think, and if we, page 4 of your presentation, the one thing that I think we have to, this one right here. It's a misnomer to look at this and compare the level of service for vehicles with what we're talking about for bicyclists and pedestrians, because no matter how you slice it, what we're doing with the bicycle and pedestrian facilities is largely subjective, whereas calculating driver level of service for vehicle lanes is a primarily objective calculation. We can count number of vehicles per hour. We can count, headway. We can measure lost time at signals and stop time and so on and so forth. So I think we have to recognize that even though we're trying to have a tool that in some respects is kind of like what we have already for vehicles and highway lanes, even still, the one is primarily subjective and the other is primarily objective. And that's, I think, a difference that we've got to keep in mind when we're looking at this. So, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Mr. President, I know Dave and I have gone back and forth on this. You know, I first I just want to, you should be given a Purple Heart. I've seen you working on this for many years. You've listened to me over many years. The fundamental view is if you want to know what an agency values, look at what they measure. Don't just listen to what they say. Look at what they measure. And we have many things in our rules and our policies and our procedures, which are kind of developed largely from a sort of a state highway model of how cars move, how vehicles move, and including the highly subjective level of service for vehicles. And it varies from state to state, from context to context. It's basically how frustrated will a driver feel if they have to wait so many seconds at a traffic light. And so it is subjective. It is fundamentally subjective because, you know, as the city gets denser and denser, people's tolerance for being able to wait at a traffic light increases. But if we are saying, well, this is where we're going to focus on our money and resources in helping to address what is anticipated as a frustration level of a driver in 20 years or 30 years. And it's like, well, what about the frustration level of, or even a sense of safety of somebody who would like to actually go to some of those businesses, that school, that park by walking or biking and not taking a car? Well, we don't measure that. So this at least gives us the ability to add a measuring tool, and there's always going to be a balancing. The thing is, and I appreciate that this is accurately described as livable streets performance measures, because this commission, prior to me, adopted a livable streets design guide. When we said streets should be livable. It's not just about ensuring people can get their cars through your neighborhood. It's about, you know, you live there and you need to feel safe there. And so this is just a continuation of the concept behind having a livable streets design guide. And it's about, it's also really good because it helps us understand we are entrusted to manage the right of way. There's public property that we are entrusted to manage. And our goal is to help ensure in a growing urban area that human beings can move within that right of way. And our focus is on the movement of people and the benefits that the community has when people can move safely. And we get less hung up on the mode by which they move and just understand that they need to have as many options, safe options as possible. And we're very much about freedom, and I think that's what our mission is about. And this is totally consistent with moving towards understanding people should have that freedom to make that choice. Not some agency has decided you only have one choice. The way we've designed this area, you can only have one choice to move around. And in many areas, sadly, that's what people have. People want to have choices, and so that they can make those choices safely. And the other is, of course, if it's a huge difference when you say, I want to choose to walk or bike. I have to take my life into my hands. I'm a lot safer driving in a car. In fact, there's all kinds of federal regulations requiring airbags and seatbelts and so forth, so that'll protect me within the car. But outside the car, I am very vulnerable. And so if that's not safe, I don't use it. And then the big question is, well, why would we spend public money to build stuff that people won't use? And it's like, well, how do we know if people won't use it? Guess what? We've got some performance measures that will tell us, that'll help us understand whether somebody will actually use this infrastructure, or if maybe our money should be better spent over here where people are more likely to use this infrastructure. That's a fiscally responsible thing to do. And of course, you're right, Ryan, this is just the very first step, because we have two areas. One is all the existing infrastructure, everything that's existing bike lanes that aren't used, existing sidewalks that aren't safe, existing crossings that need to exist. We have all of that, but at least we have some tools to help us move towards prioritizing. And then new developments, which we then, you know, as those new developments come forward, we say, okay, this is just as important to have people moving in and around the neighborhood to get to where they want to go by multi-modes. And we have some tools, developer, that we want you to use and to measure how people can move around, so that when they move into that neighborhood, they aren't forced to say, well, I only have one choice. I can only go to the store by driving. And there's plenty of developers who are figuring this out on their own. It sure helps when this agency can help partner with them with that. So the challenge, of course, and that's our job too, is to keep raising this. How are we using these tools from today, assuming we adopt this? How are we using these tools? Even if we haven't specifically changed some policies, because we're going to have policies that will beg the question, what do we have to do to change? And I'm hoping that happens in a fairly short time frame and it doesn't get dragged out over a long period of time, so we have two different standards moving forward. We sort of force that. And I know you're in a great position, because everybody likes you, Ryan, to help move and say, this policy might be able to change. The other is it's helping to our experts who mostly just deal with movement of cars to understand, in this right of way, we want more movement of people, and how can we change the policy to help us evaluate that right up front? And I could list a whole. Well, you probably already know. Justin already knows every single street in my area, which I think there's substandard sidewalks and substandard bike lanes and needed crossings. And poor Justin and Christy and others have listened to me go on and on about those specifically, and they know that I'll now be able to say, tell me more specifically about what the level of traffic stress is in this area, as we then set priorities. It doesn't mean we're going to move on them any faster, but at least it gives us the kind of tools to do that. And I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited that we can say, okay, there's a whole chunk of Boise Avenue that really isn't low stress. But it's a really old, complicated road, and we can work with the neighbors to figure out where's our priority along this, and how do we start to change it. This is really important, and what it'll help us do, I hope, is that it'll educate not just each commissioner and every future commissioner and every staff member, but also neighbors and others to say, look at these tools. And I do have to point out, legislature's not given us very many new tools or any new tools, but we're giving ourselves new tools, so we're setting the model. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks for letting me go on and on.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Ryan, great presentation. I'm just so excited, so proud of the process that you went through to get this to the final stage. I think that is almost just as important as the product itself, so thank you for that. I just have a clarifying question. Can an adoption hearing, can we provide edits and recommendations, or do we really just adopt something and we adopt it as is?
I can answer that. We can do that. It's probably unwise. We've had requests for changes as recently as the day before yesterday. They haven't been vetted. They haven't, I don't think it would be anything close to appropriate to modify it at this point, but this is something that will come before us again and again, just like most of our policies and other things we decide on. And I know that because I know Ryan will take every single one of those emails and other items that we let him know that we feel are important. And I mean, they can start incorporating it now if they feel it's worthwhile. We've already been incorporating this into some projects that we've had on the books or things that we could modify without any great effort, and that those things can happen with or without another hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. I think just to my question, looking at the public comments that we did have time to receive, that I looked at up until last night, there are some themes, and of course we can't, I have no expectation that we are going to, it's going to be a perfect product, and that we're going to answer every question and all of those things. But I think just some of the themes that I noticed were just around, bike lane widths, and if they're substandard, that they should get, a lower ranking, and also around the implementation strategy to include construction zone policies and just that kind of nexus. So I guess that's just a comment that I just noticed. There was a lot of those themes, and I would be happy to look forward to seeing what could we do to make sure that those types of concerns are addressed, even if they're perhaps not specifically listed out in this plan.
Mr. President, I just
Yes.
wanted to say thank you, Brian. It hasn't even been a year when you received this direction from the commission to go ahead and put these performance measures together. I really enjoyed going through the whole packet. It was so inclusive, and I really appreciated how you took the input from the public and did that summary sheet with the notation, and that you were able to integrate where applicable and the page number, et cetera. So it was an easy tool for the commission. And I think it really resonates with the public when they see that effort go into it, that they took the time to comment and we took it seriously. We read their comments, and I think that really goes a long way. I was really appreciative that you did incorporate some of Cynthia Gibson's comments about the pedestrian, the frequency, the distance, the signal timing. So I think that's really important, and I do appreciate those being integrated. But super job as always, and kudos to you and your team. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Mr. President, just to answer Commissioner Pickering's comment, the way I'll proceed is I see this as an invitation, and each of these comments, some of them directly affect some specific neighborhoods. And so what I would do is move forward on saying, how can we make this work in this neighborhood? And is it to change a policy, although chances are it's really about figuring out the underlying intent and then making it happen through incorporation in the scope of perhaps a community project or the scope of some other project, like the work, which I really appreciate. Anticipating this, we have changed the way we do our federal aid capital maintenance projects. And so all of those are going to be subject to the same sort of analysis. And so we can move forward and say, because I think we're going to learn how to use this. And so at least as to the areas I know there are concerns, I'm going to figure out, and some of them are raised in the notes, really good notes that we got from the public, and then figure out, okay, how does this theoretically apply in reality to this particular neighborhood? And then in the process, help the neighborhood understand, hey, here's a tool to use, and maybe there's something missing from that tool, and then they learn, and then come back to us and say, give me 2.0, tool 2.0. If we can't get it, and in most cases, it'll probably be accomplished in terms of the scoping of projects. But that's kind of the way I'll approach it. And I know I can look almost at Justin. Christie's not here. Sort of rolling his eyes thinking, oh my gosh, that means like a dozen more calls from Hanson.
Okay, then if there are no other comments or questions, we have heard from staff. Staff and the public have heard from us, and now it's time to hear from the public if there's anyone in the waiting room for us.
I do have Mr. Clancy Anderson, if you would state your name and address for the record.
Clancy, you're on.
We can't hear you, Clancy.
Clancy, we're not hearing you. Make sure your microphone is on.
Try this. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. Clancy Anderson, 1911 North 18th Street, Boise, Idaho, 83702. And I know my comments are probably some of the ones you were talking about that may not get adopted into the plan tonight, which I understand. I am late to the game. But I would consider in the buffered bike lane section of adding adjustment factors for both substandard bike lanes that are less than 5 feet wide, and then also one for average traffic. I did not speak to all the commissioners about that, but I can tell you that 2 bike lanes that are somewhat, assuming that they're 5 feet wide, use stick at Maple Grove is 22,000 vehicles a day, and Gary Lane is 10,000 vehicles a day. And I can tell you it's a much different comfort factor on those 2 roads. And so average traffic should be, what's that average traffic number to add a LTS? I don't know. 10,000 would be a good start. But that's something also I think that should be considered. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Clancy. And that's it for public comment. This was a public hearing. I'm going to close the hearing now, and it's time for the commission to make a motion and discuss and vote. Do I have a motion?
I move to adopt resolution number 2358, Livable Streets Performance Measures.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? None. The motion carries. Now we'll go to Resolution 2301, which is a vacation exchange of public right-of-way at Riverside Hotel. It's number 2301, River City Annex LLC and Riverside Hospitality LLC. It is a public hearing, and I have been asked to open the public hearing, which I hereby do, and also propose that that the item be deferred until July 14th, 2021. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We'll go to item number 3, which is the same as item number 3 on the consent agenda previous. It's an automatic vehicle location hardware and services purchase agreement, a request for approval. And so, Aaron, would you tell us a little bit about this software and this product and what it's for, why we need it, and all that good stuff?
Sorry. For the record, Aaron Chestnut, Fleet Coordinator. Is there any specific questions that there might be? So the AVL is a telematic device that is installed in the vehicle, and it reads off the computer. So it tells the vehicle's exact location, time, date, vehicle, driving history, engine diagnostics, and just some of the basic vehicle locatings. It also tracks sweeping activities, winter operations activities, such as where they've plowed, where we haven't plowed, as well as some of the application of the anti-icing materials. It's also a very great resource in assisting some of the vehicle investigations when there's accidents or speeding questions from the public and complaints.
Dave, you were the one that wanted that.
Mr. President, thank you.
Yes.
Just a couple of questions on this. I think I have a good understanding of what the system is. And I guess basically my question boils down to this. We've not been using this previously, right? And earlier when we were discussing, potentially giving.
We have. Yes.
Oh, we have been using this. So is this just a replacement of an existing system?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, we have used this in the past. We do have it up until a few months ago, had it installed in 90 of our units that we use primarily in sweeping activity as well as winter operations. We've decided to move away from that from the sole reason that it didn't meet our future needs. It was unreliable and was not giving us the information that we needed.
I see. So this is a replacement for something that's existing. It's just a better system.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Because the only question I had, and I guess and it's not exactly the same as my previous thoughts, but the earlier we talked about providing some of our funds to VRT for additional things, and I have to admit, as time goes by and we get closer and closer to deciding on budget questions, I find myself becoming more and more frugal, and wanting to pinch every penny. Have we looked at this and have we looked at this in the past and determined that the cost is worth the benefit? And I guess that's my only question. Can we look at this and say, yeah, this saves us X dollars per year, therefore it's worth spending this much? Have we done that kind of an analysis on this?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, we have to the best of our ability. Unfortunately, we don't have the option of knowing what an accident's going to cost or using it in investigating an accident. We do have some costs that we can associate. We anticipate in the last 24 months, we anticipate that it could have saved us about $115,000, from repairs, because one of the attributes of this software is that it does remote diagnostics for the engine. So any fault codes that come on, the shop can immediately get a text message or an email or both that states this is what's going on with the unit, instead of the driver continuing to drive it and not see it. So we potentially could have in the last 24 months saved at least $115,000 in those repairs.
Okay.
Primarily to the DEF issues, check engine lights, and those engines derating.
Okay.
But-
So if we look at all the numbers all together, then my recollection is that the upfront cost is about 200,000, and then there's an annual cost of about 70,000 or so.
Correct.
And then your comment here about the maintenance issue, that's a savings of about 60,000 a year or so, at least over the last 2 years. Okay. So if we look at that and I'm kind of running through the numbers in my head. And then your comment also is that it helps potential savings for potential accident situations. How does this system give us that? How does it perform that?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, if I could offer a couple extra insights on this.
Sure.
First off, when we initially invested in the system, we received something that we never had in the past. That was an ability to specifically understand what each of your vehicles does. Aaron and group produce a quarterly report to me that tells me by the vehicle number, by the penny, by the use of the hours of that vehicle, of how it's doing and how much we're spending on a basis. We see differences in the system, therefore we can make adjustments to ensure that we're equally using and equally distributing all of the hard time that we put on all of your vehicles or the taxpayer feels across the board. It also helps us when it comes down to sale time, auction time. We have a pretty good reputation of throughout the business community, not only here in the state but outside of the state, of producing incredibly great pre-owned equipment that generally guarantees a higher return on investment. We do that because we have the information and tools and the knowledge of what each of those systems has done based on what Aaron and Jennifer have invested in the past. The other part that we haven't been able to leverage as much as we want, but we will with this now, is we'll have a better idea of how much we're spending when it comes down to snow operations. We have a better understanding as we tie this into the weather systems we already have on the roads, how much dispersal should be being made to make optimum use of the mat chloride, salt, sand, those sort of things. So at the end of the day, it is a great tool. We get a lot of use out of that. And then for accidents, I know the General Counsel here is very keen on this. There are many times when we have been alleged to do certain things with our vehicles. With these systems, we're able to unequivocally prove that, yes, we did, or two, I'm sorry, we were not even in the area, or no, we were not going 44 in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. We were actually doing 23. That's the system back for, and that saves us costs on his end, which sir, it can be quite expensive. And so at the end of the day, this is why we invest in this, and it's been proven, at least during my tenure, that we've had this, to be very beneficial when it comes down to optimizing and maximizing the efficiency of our operation going forward. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay.
And I think, just going forward, I always like to see cost-benefit analysis when we're looking at spending
Yes, sir.
money. And so those are the kind of concerns that come up when we're looking at, several $100,000. I want to make sure that, it's really going to give us what we want.
But I've been very amazed, again, at Aaron's expertise in this and being able to show me and the team by vehicle, miles, time, cost per mile, so that we can look at these things and make the appropriate adjustments and divest ourselves, when appropriate, of systems that we're not using to the maximum extent, put it back out, and potentially get a couple dollars back in. And if we are overusing certain pieces of equipment, well, then we can dig into that and understand the reasons why, and maybe make, again, more efficient, effective use of those, again, through Aaron's operations as our fleet coordinator.
All right, thank you, Director, thank you.
Mr. President and
Yes.
Director, and I believe there's an aspect of the AVL that is publicly accessible. So this having AVL on these vehicles allows people, when with the snowplows in particular, they can get online and know exactly where that plow is, so that they know when to anticipate when it's. And I think that was recently added.
That was one of the
back.
initiatives,
Yeah.
Mr. President, Commissioner, that we
got.
worked. Of course, Aaron's group did,
Yeah.
and as in the pre-read that you got there, it's a two-phased approach. First phase is going to be on sweepers across the board because, as you know, incredibly important. And as we finish that, then we are going to go through all vehicles again with your approval. And for the costs associated, that was a 3-year cost, if I'm not mistaken. You have, well, 2-year cost. You have the initial equipment cost, which is about $71,000, and then it's $71,000 to $75,000 per year for those first 2 years for the system, the software and support. And then it's after that, it's about a $72,000 a year contract with the company, which again, one of the benefits, it's a local company, and such as opposed to what we were dealing with in the past. So I hate to put it this way, but you actually have your hands around their throats if wrong locally versus having to go across the board. So again, I hope that answers all your questions.
Bruce, I'm just remembering back to 5 years ago when a majority of the commission kind of forced us to keep some of our equipment longer than we used to. Has this helped justify that as a good decision?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And it's also justified, again, Mr. President, us not keeping
Right.
The pieces of equipment that we don't need to use. And for you, I think you've seen that move when it comes down to the auction of some of the pieces that, you know, we may have only had for a couple years or a year or two. Not using it. It's not what we thought. Off to the auction block. Let's get our money back.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes?
Mr. Clancy has a comment as well.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Clancy.
Oh, I have to ask him to unmute. There we go.
Oh, got to unmute Clancy.
Hi there. Clancy Anderson, 1911 North 18th Street, Boise, Idaho. I was actually going to comment about what Commissioner Hansen actually brought up is the public side of it. There's lots of Department of Transportations out there that have great systems that show you where the snowplows have been. Billings does a great job of that. Or no, Bozeman does. And then also there's some, like I think in Iowa or Minnesota, they actually give you cameras also on the front of the plows, and that lets your constituents know that you guys are out there doing a tough job in winter conditions. And so I think the public side of this is an exciting aspect and should be implemented as soon as it can be, even on the sweepers. That's it.
Thanks, Clancy. There's no one else, Stacy?
Nope, we're good.
Okay, then in that case, this is a request for approval, so I would entertain a motion to approve item number 3.
Mr. President,
Yes,
I move we approve the automatic vehicle location hardware and services purchase agreement.
thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aaron,
Thank
you
you.
swayed the day.
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah, good job, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then we are now to the portion of our meeting where we have public communications. Is there anyone who would like to speak to us? In that case, the meeting is adjourned and we'll move into our director's report.
Mr. President, Commissioners, again, good evening. Twofold. I was going to make part of this presentation, again, an update on the metrics that I do with you on a monthly basis. I will send those to you. It's in a PowerPoint form, so it'll be easy just to flip through as we go to save a little bit of time. But anyway, Commissioners, I have been asked to update you on where we are with implementing the red before PED features at the intersections with flashing yellows. And as you know, we have gone to prioritizing pedestrians at crosswalks while negating the yellow until the pedestrian had exceeded or had requested the number of seconds that we do as pedestrians cross sidewalks. That being said, here's the stats right now that we do know. We have 220 intersections that are planned to be upgraded. Of those 220, and I'm more than happy to send this to all of you again because I see you furiously,
That would be great.
furiously writing. I will do that. We have 107 existing controllers that have been upgraded already with this feature, and we have 43 of those 107 that still need to be updated with the latest version of the software, because software continues to change as we move forward. However, and unfortunately, ACHD has paused installing additional controllers in the field because we've had 5 command controllers, which is an interesting number. I'm going to say in quotes, blow up. They didn't explode and stuff, but they just did not work in the field. And so to try to find the root cause of that before we invest any more dollars in this, ACHD returned 20 command controllers to Trafficware, which is the software group that has built this very neat system that, again, keeps the yellow from flashing until the pedestrian has had the time allotted to get through the crosswalk. And they're investigating possible internal power supply issues. And we did this on May 25th, so it's been very recent. Currently, Trafficware is bench testing the hot-cold chamber requirements to see if there's any type of root causes when it comes to heat. It's very interesting. Started in May. So you remember May was a little warm and such. So far, unfortunately, nothing has been found to be an issue and with the internal power supplies based on the current testing. We're still waiting for a report from the power supply manufacturer, which is based in Japan. So there's a little bit of a lag there of the analysis of those 5 power supplies that just went bad on us. The plan is to return all command controllers that we have now to Trafficware for remediation when they find the solution, as soon as the root cause is known and have a fix determined. We will do this in groups of 20 to 50, so it isn't going to be a long time and such. And so we want to make sure that we're increasing the quality of the product as we speed up this process going forward. So once the power supply issue has been identified and the fix is implemented, we can feel comfortable in finishing installing the remaining controllers that we already have identified in the field. And of course, this is slightly complicated by of course, the recent departure of 2 of our traffic control engineers that have gone to tremendous opportunities, but our HR team is doing a great job on recruiting, and with the incentives we have in the out in the field, I don't see this as a very long-term issue across the board. So that's my update on that. Do you have any questions at this point on this?
Mr. President?
Yes.
Director Wong, thank you so much for that explanation. I'm wondering, how long does it take, though, to program the 20 to 25 controllers that you're talking about? So it's like once all of the root cause is discovered and we have we have staffing, we've got all those elements, how long should it take for us to do
It will be one of our top priorities to get that done as quickly as possible. I think it would be beneficial if we had the opportunity to show you the process that we have to go through, of course, at your convenience. But this is a big deal, and we'll do it as quickly as we possible. I can't give you 10 minutes or this sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is not a product that once we install them, it's just like flipping a switch on a network to make sure everything. Yes. It is.
No, it's that we can do it from here.
Yes.
But we have to install it, test it, and then make sure all the electrons flow accordingly.
That's individually.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. Again, but we're going to do it in batches, so we aren't doing one here and then one here and one here. I think that's a great way to pursue this issue.
Mr. President and Director, thanks. That'll be really helpful. I wonder, this might not be related to the same issue, but at the intersection of Burgesson and Federal Way, because there's that right turn, so the yellows are left turns, but there's a right turn issue because it's a basically right turn on red, and it's an easy right turn. But because of sight issues, drivers don't see people ready to cross, or even if they push the button. If there's a way to install a light that comes on that says no right turn on red when lit, which I've seen these. I don't know whether we could incorporate that into our evaluation of that particular intersection and the electronics there, or whether that's a separate one. But if I could just flag that, that's an area I've heard from a number of people who are they're just really scared to cross at that without making sure, because those people come up Burgesson and make a right turn without stopping. They're supposed to stop on red, but
One
they
of the
don't.
things.
They just go boom. But if there's
How do they go?
a light, well, you go up there and watch. So anyway, it's again, it's context sensitive, but I don't know if you're in there redoing all the wiring, the electronics, and you can say, hey, it's a very, it's a signal on the right turn. Anyway, I'll just put that in your hat and you can move on.
Okay. Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, thank you. I know that the acting deputy director of Development Technical Services, who is sitting right over there, is taking a very good note on this.
I keep looking at it.
But I will say this: there are other things that we briefed you on that we are attempting to do to provide more situational awareness to drivers when pedestrians are in the crosswalk. Different lighting things, different stuff.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy on the next thing to give you an update of where we are on those. But again, technology, as you know, is always interesting.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Goldthorpe, Steve Price, Sean Martin, Paul Daigle, and I met with the TDS leadership, and as you know, that is the group that is doing the fiber installations that has caused multiple concerns in Boise and Garden City, and it was at their request to meet to apologize for their company's less than stellar operations and provide their strategy going forward to fix past bad practices and improve their operations in Ada County. I do believe positive steps after the meeting are at hand, but as always, the proof is in the pudding. We'll keep you posted. Commissioner Goldthorpe, did I miss anything on that?
Yeah, just the part that, how pleased I was that you were not easy on them. And we did talk about fines.
Yes.
And so I'm hoping that some of those will come to pass soon.
Sir, after the meeting, it didn't take that long, but we actually got you remember the CEO was talking about a triage operation? Yes. We got the phone number. We're already sending them out. You may have already seen them on the TELUS when people come in and say, these people are ripping up my lawn. There's their phone number. They've got a team that's answering those. We'll see how it goes. Again, I thought there was a good faith effort, and it was always good faith on their part to come in and sit down and let us know that they realized how badly their operation was, and they shared with us some of the fixes that they're already doing, and they shared with us their strategy going forward. So as I said, and thank you, Commissioner Goldthorpe, because I do appreciate you. We're going to be tough on them.
And it's going to cost, but I was stunned to find out that their contract with their subs said that they didn't get paid till the job was done and everything worked fine.
Right.
So they got some arm twisting room there, I would imagine.
Mr. President, for Steve, it would be helpful, I think, to inform the neighborhood to the extent you can inform the neighborhood about these, because we are hearing a lot from specific neighborhoods. They have communication networks. I even was approached in Rotary on Tuesday morning from somebody in one of the Garden City neighborhoods on the other side of the river, several people, and I recognize the addresses on some of the TELUSes. So to the extent they have a communication network, if you can communicate back to them saying, we've taken this seriously, there may be some, we anticipate there's going to be some penalties or whatever, so that they know there's been some follow-up from the whole, because the fact that it's just that, some people have contacted us doesn't mean there's a whole lot of people who aren't really upset. And of course, to them, the people responsible for it is ACHD. Yep. And so it's very important that we communicate to the neighborhood through their communication, that whatever is next door, or their websites or whatever.
Mr. President, if I can, that was the point I was going to bring up, and it was actually an issue that Commissioner May had several weeks ago, And we brought it up during the meeting and told them that a couple of big issues for the district. One is ADA and temporary facilities, and two was the community outreach before they go for the project. And they gave us a defined program, a plan, that before they go into a neighborhood and they start doing work, they're going to put up sandwich boards, that they're going to send cards, that they're going to, and before the shovel hits the ground, the people will be contacted and notified, which has been one of the big issues. And their reaction was a little taken back by it. Oddly enough, that afternoon, we got a tellus from a gentleman in Riverside Village, very upset, wanted to file a class action lawsuit for digging up his yard, and that is something that we sent on to them and gave them a few other. We got 3 in an afternoon regarding TDS, and we sent those as these are examples, and we'll most certainly integrate with your triage construction group, and they did. And as the director, I think, most certainly made a difference in the meeting. He most certainly was rough on them, and I think they got the message, and they most certainly made heartfelt commitment that they would address those issues.
Oh, boy. Mr. President?
Yes.
I just want to say thank you very much. That's perfect. Good to have that going forward. It's going to resonate.
We also recommended strongly that, and Commissioner May, Goldthorpe, and Pickering, you may have noticed at the Garden City State of the City, there was a table there that said TD, and there was really nobody at it. We made the recommendation strongly that they do a couple things. Number one, as Steve said, community outreach is vital, not only once, but twice, 3, 4 times. But we suggested that they sit down on a frequent basis and talk to the neighborhood associations. We asked them to talk to the city council members. We asked them to meet with the mayors on a frequent basis, like what we do when it comes down to our liaisons and stuff being about. So I was surprised to see that seemed to be.
Can we make that a
stuff.
requirement before they're allowed to get into the right of way?
I can't answer that.
Communicate with the neighborhood they're going to be affecting.
But anyway, again, the proof's in the pudding. We'll keep you posted. And but I do feel that it was a good session that we had. I wanted to keep you, as I have done every week, basically posted on the economic front. It's not good news. As of last week, the Consumer Price Index for the Western region, and we're talking just the Western region now, was 5.5%, which is a 13-year high. Asphalt is up 7.7%. If you can get it, West region's cement cost is up 5.2%. Iron and steel are up 74.9%. Truck and bus tires, so again, truck and bus tires are up 3.5%, and plywood is up 98.4%. Food and beverages are up 3.2%, with unleaded gas up 41.8%, again in our area, and diesel up 43.8%, both affecting us for the region. Transportation overall costs are up 19.6%. In Ada County, existing residential listings are down 32.6%, no inventory. Existing sold homes, average price was $623,268, which is up 56.7% from last year. New construction listings are down 72%, again, no bench stock and stuff, with the average sold price at $604,394, which is up 31.7%. And finally, the wholesale prices for used cars, this is the wholesale prices for used cars sold at auction, is up 39%, with the retail used car price up 20%. As you can see, it continues to be a challenge across the board. As we have discussed, ACHD will be conducting redistricting actions throughout the summer. This will affect all of you and ACHD. We are told, she's smiling over there, we are told that the state requires this to be completed by the end of the year. We are going to work to have it completed by 1 October.
Okay, now, we're involved in this, correct?
You are involved. We will ask you your pit, but you're not going to say move the line here or here. We'll work that with you. We don't want to
Right.
put you in a less than ethical position.
Understood.
Yeah.
When are the census stats due out?
Well, it's interesting. August is so
Okay.
we're doing. We have she is going to be leading the charge on this, so we know it's going to be done absolutely correct and such. But she's the project manager, and of course we're going to welcome your thoughts and keep you posted. But we're looking at things now on voter. What was the voter look on this? How many are registered? We've got some Compass information that we can probably start thinking about. But until the census actually comes online, then that we have to use that. We will keep you completely posted on what we're going to do because the lines are going to be redrawn.
Mr. President,
This should be easy, because this really should not be
Yeah,
difficult.
shouldn't be too difficult, but I would suggest that we create or ensure that there is someone independent within the staff and perhaps even outside the staff working to develop on these. And I think the commission and the director has a conflict to try and do it directly. The director is hired by the commission. So I'd ask the director not be involved in the process, that it be involved something that is developed. Obviously, we have to adopt it, but at least the drawing of the lines cuts the director. He has so that he's not in a compromised position either, that it be handled administratively and as independently as possible, so that it's not.
You don't want gerrymandering, is that?
That's right. That's right.
Well, yeah,
and to the extent we can.
We're not going to be doing like the
No.
statewide redistricting garbage. This is going to be simple stuff.
Yeah, I would just ask that, avoid the director's involvement at all in any of the developing of proposed new lines and have that.
Well, I'll tell you this. I have absolutely no qualms about whoever is selected on or off staff for doing this because of who oversees it, which is the 5 of us.
Right.
I'll just be interested in seeing how simple it is. For 2 years now, I've told you which precincts to take away from me because it's just simple and sweet. Mm-hmm. I think I've mentioned that to the rest of you too.
The legislative process has a website you can use. At least they did 10 years ago. So it was.
So anyway, the sooner the better.
We will keep you posted, but I want to make sure you understand that we're going to start this here soon and such. Again, per your request, we will also soon begin initial recommendations for your consideration and decision on your legislative initiatives for 2022. I'm glad that Commissioner Pickering may have raised this earlier, because what we're also going to recommend to you and strongly suggest is that each legislative initiative, each that you select, that you decide based, we'll make you some recommendations, be assigned to a commissioner to carry this through the legislative process as the stakeholder, of course, with all the support of our lobbyists and our staff. But it's a different twist. But as I shared with you, I think last week, as things get more complicated and interesting going forward, we're going to make that recommendation. So if you have 25 legislative initiatives, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll be up to the president and vice president, of course, to determine that. But that's going to be our recommendation going forward. And I think that by doing that, you will increase and enhance that collaborative at the elected official level going into this session. Then again, it could be the stupidest decision on the planet, and it could have interesting consequences going back. So that is our recommendation. We're going to follow up, but we want to start this based on your request early so that you have the opportunity, if you elect to share this with your things with cities, counties, dog catchers, whichever you prefer. As you saw in this morning's press release, Community Ride's grant program will greatly help those targeted businesses regarding transportation choices. It was a great article. Well, we are going to be able to do more and such, and I've been careful because the Chief of Staff is watching me on this. I got clearance from commuter riders. Okay, very good. And I have been given permission, that's right, I've been given permission to share with you that Commuter Ride just received an additional $35,000 for this program of grants, small grants to small businesses that will benefit them in transportation choices going forward. I'm also told that we will be able to share the sponsor's name in the very near future as soon as the official sponsor's announcement is made. Okay, I'm still good, all right. And I did get that right, correct? All right, very good. So that's great news. You know, we've talked about this a little earlier, but we do have the official $35,000 more to put into the grant programs for this. Yesterday, Commissioner May and I attended the ITD board meet and greet hosted by the WTS, and it was a good session. One of the topics that was raised was Meridian's requested Linder overpass. We understand that the mayor will be presenting this to the board tomorrow. I think I've shared that with you earlier. And as I shared with you on Monday, we also received a call from Meridian's staff asking if the commission would be budgeting any dollars toward this proposal. As you also know, ACHD is scheduled to appear before the Meridian Council on 13 July for our USTIC maintenance facility decision. Timing is awfully interesting on all of these actions back and forth. Currently, so that you know, this is Meridian's top integrated 5E work plan request, correct, Justin? And is on the unfunded list with no specific date for design and or construction. After lengthy discussions with our staff, it might be advantageous to budget for and do a concept study in 2023 as a placeholder only for any potential considerations that ITD or you all might have going forward. Commissioners, do you have any initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, do it.
Say again?
Yes, do it.
Okay.
Well, are you attaching a number to this? Are we?
Well, I'm
just
sure
putting
it's
it
going to
on a
be
list?
between $100,000 and $200,000 to do the concept study, top to bottom.
So are we putting the cart before the horse just a little bit? They're going to present to ITD tomorrow. I mean, I don't know about putting in a line item with dollars attached to it, just nice to have if it's not going to go anywhere. So, I mean, is there anything that we have to do that tonight? Let's see how it goes with ITD.
I'm not suggesting that tonight or right away.
Yeah.
My thought was from
Prove
the
it.
commission is that we think it would be advantageous as we've already given you a very, what I'm going to call a 150,000 foot look as to what this thing potentially would cost if the commission elected to do this, if ITD, it's their project,
Right.
Elected to do it.
Well,
if
and we
all
sent
these
the
things,
letter, right.
right. And so, but our thought is that just to be prepared, so that if you're asked at some time in the future, and I'm looking at 2023 budget, so it's not in the area. If you're asked by any of the elected officials or any interested party or ITD, have you as a commission considered looking at this going forward? You're going to be able to say, yes, we are looking at this as a concept that we would fund in 2023 with no promises whatsoever of date, times, whatever, but at least we would have a better understanding of what the right-of-way costs would be, what the impacts to the neighbors would be, how this could or could not be funded by an urban renewal district, because as you know, there's all sorts of business propositions that go into that, and quite frankly, we don't see that right now on this. And it might provide an opportunity for additional discussion between you and the board members of ITD as to whether or not this really is feasible, or is this really just a pipe dream going forward. We think it is a lot of dollars. I get that. I don't know what the specific cost is, but if we budget it in 2023, that gives you a little bit of time before you even would have to commit to anything. And at the same token, it does allow us to get a little bit more closer to facts for you to use in any discussions you might have. That's the only reason that we
So you're,
suggest we do that.
Mr. President and Director, you're proposing a concept study in 2023, shared cost by Meridian Development Corporation, Meridian, NITD, and ACHD.
Sir, I can't make that.
No, but I mean, but that would be the idea. We shared ownership
That
over
would
the
be an
concept.
idea going forward,
So
yes.
shared ownership over the
Right.
cost of the concept, it seems to me, makes sense. And then it's not as much for all of the
Right.
partners. But I think,
So we're hoping that it would be shared costs?
well,
that
I
would
would
be a-
prefer shared costs because then there's shared ownership
I would-
over,
yes,
yeah.
I would prefer
Much
that
more
too,
shared
but I
ownership
just don't know.
over,
Yeah.
and more, we're likely to look at only certain things than the Development Corporation or the city or ITD. But if we're all looking at things, including the concept of a potential
And that-
impact of a urban
That's
renewal
the
district.
point, because as you recall, Commissioners,
So
the mayor has
we all
already
have
said
a
he's got
skin
$2.5
in this
million
game.
that he wants to put into this project and such. So, it'll be up to you to give us guidance as to what that distribution might be. But at the end of the day, I think it's probably advantageous for the Ada County Highway District to at least take that first step and see where we are.
Yeah.
John, what was the total estimate on
The
that
estimate
project?
was it was about $22 million across the board, $6 million for ITD, and then 15 to 16 million for us. That was again 150,000 foot quick look to say here, and of course our staff's pretty good at this. This then would be able to really dial it down to say this is right away. These are the areas. Here's what you're going to have to destroy. I shouldn't use that word. And here's what you're going to have to be able to build. But I want to remind the commission that this is not your project. ITD has got to agree and step up and say, we're going to build this. My personal opinion at this point, it can potentially be a great project, but I don't see any appetite today on the ITD's boards or the staffs to do this. The focus that they have is on 5 Mile at this point. And so, again,
Bruce, would you or Justin explain to or inform the rest of the commission as to what happened at the planning and zoning meeting and how personal it got to geographic areas where certain members of the commission lived and their desire perhaps to condition a permit and, all this stuff?
You're talking about the USTIC
Yes.
facility? There was good discussion and such. Now, what I'll share with you, there was discussion on the record and there was discussion off the record. On the record, the P&Z was very supportive of the USTIC plant. The concern was that they wanted to ensure, Jennifer, that they were concerned about additional truck traffic being on USTIC in that area before the road was widened and or a turn lane into the facility was made. There was debate back and forth because one of the P&Z, who is a council member, if I'm not mistaken, kind of corrected someone else to say, no, there's enough traffic. There's a lot of truck traffic there as it is right now. And so the recommendation from P&Z was to move forward, but to condition their okay that we would build the turn range in during phase 4. We've looked at that, and commissioners, I'll let you know that we could do it in phase 1. It's in the integrated. I mean, we got it. It's not a big deal and such. After the meeting, when the recordings were off, I guess I shouldn't say that. When the finish was done, there was a lot of yes, this is going to be great. We can't wait to have this facility in our neighborhood. We're going to have our own ACHD maintenance operation as opposed to sharing. Yeah, okay. But there was that back and forth. We believe, and Justin, we're still good on that, right? For the integrated. We believe that we can get this done. We're okay from a staff perspective. It'll be, of course, your final decision, but of doing that on the phase 4 that we've showed you on this, we can do it earlier, and we really don't. We're not going to be using that facility until, based on the phases that we've briefed you on, we have all those set in stone. But that was it. I think there's a lot of support. And the concern, well, we get the concern, but for us, it's not an issue. We can get it done.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I have a question still going back on this Linder overpass issue. My recollection last time we talked about it was that from the standpoint of the Idaho Transportation Department and the Federal Highway Administration, step one for this to even be considered was to get it on the list.
Yes.
And to my understanding, has that even happened
No.
yet? It's not even on it's not even on the radar for the Idaho Transportation Department or the Federal Highway Administration. What has to happen for that step one to take place?
The chairman or any of the board members have got to say, it's now step one. That's really about it.
Because my recollection is that the comment that was made that once something even gets to that step one, it's usually something like 10 years before a project actually gets built, typically.
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney,
16.
that depends. That depends on the criticality. It depends on the decisions of the board. Like our commission here on the integrated 5E work plan or community programs, you have a lot of flexibility. And there are, when you decide that there's a project that is come to your attention that's much more critical to the public to do prior than when they're in the approved integrated 5E work plan, it gets moved and such, and their choices and stuff. But that is truly a decision for ITD. Our staff's thought here is that this is not going away, and as we could, if we can partner with the different agencies to at least do the okay, here's ground truth on this, that might clarify and crystallize. It does make sense, or it makes no sense at all, and especially when we're talking about the urban renewal district part of this. It's I don't know if everybody understands on outside of data kind of what that really means. So that's but it's
Okay.
the chairman of the board could say, let's do it.
Yeah.
And the mayor will be in front of that board tomorrow. His staff, their staff has prepared comments for them, and it's up to them to figure out what they want to do. But again, it is an ITD project. We are not in the business of building lead-ups to overpasses that don't exist.
What is there anything that we can do to, assist
I think
the mayor in his appeal to the
I think that
ITD board?
the commission has already done that, sir, and we can get you a copy of the
letter.
joint letter that ACHD, Meridian, and Ada County commissioners did send to the board. And we listed out a series of things that we think should be important to happen. We've had those discussions with the staff to say, these are our thoughts on how you might want to go ahead, but you've got to do A, B, C, or D first. And those big issues are ITD has got to say, yes, we're going to do that. But that's where we are on that.
When does ITD make decisions of that sort all throughout the year, or is there any particular time when they kind of?
I'm going to say it's a hit and go.
Okay.
It really is.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Right. Next Wednesday, commissioners, you are hosting STAR on a joint session. As of this afternoon, we have not received their suggestions on topics. We'll continue to push hard to find out what they'd like to talk about. We will also be holding a joint meeting with Eagle in mid to late July for a final discussion on the proposed quadrant project that we have going forward. This will be a request of the leadership at Eagle to sit down with you to go one more time through this. And finally, and probably not the greatest news in the world, as you know, the construction project for Locust Grove, Victory to Overland, and the Locust Grove and Victory roundabout, which is the companion project, has continued to be a huge challenge, as we reported, regarding our new bike and pedestrian concepts that was brought up a little earlier, that has required new designs and additional right-of-way negotiations for the added space to build the multi-use paths. Not a surprise. After many pointed discussions with our staff, I have made the very difficult but appropriate decision to strategically pause this project for 1 year. Prior to ACHD's new direction on bike facilities, these projects were planned to be constructed with buffered bike lanes in FY 2022, and as such, the right-of-way was almost completed. The redesign process with multi-use pathways is well underway, and we have new right-of-way plans that we have to execute in the coming months to accommodate those new initiatives. The design team is doing an excellent job, and they are trying to avoid additional right-of-way actions, but it is now obvious that regardless of the great efforts that your right-of-way team has done, that this is unavoidable in these circumstances. Specifically, our right-of-way team will need to re-engage some property owners in the right-of-way process that we have already closed on with the previous design. As you can imagine, this is a difficult task, and we should anticipate some property owners questioning why we are back for more. We will work through that. As a strategic pause and change is daylighted with the public and the city, you're hearing this first today. Through the budget integrated five-year work plan process, we should anticipate some concerns from neighbors, citizens, etc. And we will move forward. As we move forward, we will work very diligently with communications to best ensure that all the facts are on the table and all are understood as to reasons why we are enhancing the project that we've gone. But
so, Mr. President and Director, so we are looking at the option of acquiring more right-of-way, but not looking at the option of whether we really need 7 lanes or.
That's correct. We are not.
So we are assuming that we will definitely need all of those traffic lanes, and that well, that's what I would object to. I think that we should have an opportunity to look at it side by side, the cost benefit, which I agree with Commissioner McKinney. We should be doing cost benefit analysis. And I don't think that it justifies to have that many lanes and turning lanes all along Fairview. It's just not justified. And so,
well, you know, it's interesting. Again,
yeah. So, but I just want to voice that. I voiced it when it was up earlier. I don't think we need that kind of.
One of the interesting challenges that the
yeah.
Commission is going to have very shortly is that if the City of Boise goes through with their plan to not build or build the park out on the Mergurio property that they have said they would do for years and years and years and years, and swap it for properties to, again, in a good cause, to preserve more of the foothills area. This is a 7-lane road, and every road around it's going to be a 7-lane road. And that's just my perspective. It's your decision.
Well,
we
we're
will
just
induce a
deciding
lot
on
of congestion
5, right?
with it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the developer is now known, and no applications have been filed.
No.
So please expect some kind of conversation with interested parties that won't cause ex parte.
So, Commissioners, that's my director's report. Again, thank you for spending the time. There was a lot I had to share with you on this, so and I'll send this out to you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
One quick thing, we've received lots of emails on a project, a maintenance. I think it's a maintenance project, a drainage project, Shenandoah and Roanoke. I would ask, because we knew we could have anticipated a response, again, notifying the commissioner in that district and notifying the neighbor in advance what some of the complexities are, so that we aren't sort of backfilling and reacting to reactions. So that's something I would ask, that as we anticipate some of these issues, I know ACHD is working on it with the city of Boise. They're making some decisions, loop the neighborhood in so they understand and they appreciate, because it's some of the same people who tell us about leaking on the road and ice on the road in the wintertime. So they understand, but they, the fact that we didn't give them that kind of, or me, because the first time I heard about it was through the telesis. So I would just ask that there be some information on the front end. It improves and it's less disempowering for the neighbors.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, yeah, we can do that. Did you happen to read the note I sent to
Yes,
to
no, I
Sheila?
read it. It's really good.
And
I
that's
just
it.
would have loved that explanation
We would
before
have
we
too,
got.
but again, we made an assumption that since this is a Boise project, that would have gone back.
No.
But we'll work it. We'll work it.
Yeah, the more we can err on the side of helping understand what neighbors understand what's going to happen in their neighborhood, the better we are, and the more supportive they are of the work we do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Yeah, Dave, we sent a letter of support.
Right.
Kendra and I both signed it.
Right.